Well, kids going back to school in the fall has become a topic that has captured national attention. But it's not only an issue that the U.S. is facing. Other countries around the world are trying to figure out the same thing, essentially. Let's look at a few of the countries that already have a plan in place. Canada is planning on reopening most of its schools in the fall with more of a hybrid approach for older children and by limiting class sizes. And over to the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is trying to have schools open by September. The goal was to have them open earlier, with The Guardian reporting the initial plan was to have classes of no more than 15 students, but it wasn't possible to do space and size. And then in Israel, schools did actually open back in May, but then they had to shut down for a short term because there was another spike. And then finally in Germany, they are currently planning on resuming normal operations next month. But will the U.S. have a plan in place in time? We're just a few weeks away now. To discuss this complex issue, let's bring in Beth Martin, who is leading the conversation with the president and pediatricians to get kids back in school. And she's also the chairperson for the Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund. Beth, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, you have a lot on your plate. You've been helping coordinate letters to the president from hundreds of physicians and nurses and even teachers. And as I understand correctly, you were recently at the White House attending a roundtable discussion with the president and the vice president. I'm trying to figure out how to reopen schools. Based on what you're learning from these letters you've been receiving, what kind of guidance did you give to the president?
Well, the most important guidance that I gave, I was speaking more as a parent and letting the president know that there are a lot of parents across the country who need school to open for all sorts of reasons, and students need school to open. As I listen to physicians and to educators from around the country and pediatricians, pediatric psychiatrists, pediatric neurologists, what they're telling me is that children, they can get COVID, so it would be inaccurate to say they cannot get sick from it. They can, but it's very, very, very rare for children to die from COVID. In fact, it's more likely that they would die from the flu than from COVID for children, not for adults, but for children. And there is no known transmission from children to adults. So even if children are in a classroom and there is an adult teacher in the classroom, we have not heard of any transmission from a child to an adult, which means that the teachers in the classroom with the students would be at less risk than in other things they may be doing.
Beth, I know you're a parent. Do you know what your kids are doing?
I do. My school system will be opening school in about a little less than 2 weeks. We open really early in Georgia. So they're going to be opening. They have 5 days a week in the class. There is also a virtual option for people who may have maybe either they're afraid or they have somebody at high risk in their household. And there are several different school districts in the Metro Atlanta area, in the outer Metro Atlanta area, that are offering in-person classrooms. It seems like really close to the center of Atlanta, they're still doing virtual.
It's interesting. You've been a big leader in the conservative movement. Do you think, it's funny, Lindsay was just talking to you about the White House meeting, whatever. Do you think that this is a state and local issue, or should the federal government be involved?
Well, I think that there is a federal government component because the federal government does send money to schools, but more than the funding, right now what is happening is that the CDC, people are looking to the CDC and trying to figure out whether they're safe, what's risky, what's not risky, how should we be living and socially distancing from the CDC. That is at the federal level. So looking at the CDC and the guidelines they gave for reopening schools is definitely a federal issue. My urge has been that those guidelines need to be revised. Whether they're revised or not, the American Academy of Pediatrics did their own guidelines that maybe I don't like everything in those guidelines, but they're much more to my liking. And then when it comes to opening schools themselves, it is going to be up to the local community or the state for how that happens. And that's how it should be.
I know that many have been saying that we don't have enough supplies or enough things in place to actually get these open, but Vice President Pence says that we're actually ready. Listen to this.
We think we can safely reopen schools. The risk to children is very low. We believe that responsible plans can be developed, like you've seen developed here at the local level and at the state level. that will protect our students, protect faculty, protect the community, and protect the most vulnerable. And so my pledge to every parent is we're going to continue to work our hearts out to make sure that the guidance is there.
You know, something that's interesting, even in the last 72 hours, we've seen a lot of these schools say they're going online. Where's the disconnect when, like you're saying, Jenny Beth, you have so many pediatricians coming out saying that the safe thing is to send them back?
I honestly think that the disconnect is with when you turn on the news at night and you see the ticker that says this is the number of new cases, these are the number of people who have died, and people are not looking between those two numbers of the people who have fought and beat COVID. The two numbers alone are very scary, and the fear is permeating our country. I think there are political motivations. When politicians get involved, they're political animals, and there's certainly political motivations, but fear is what's driving a lot of the decisions. They're not looking at the facts, they're just afraid. In fact, child psychiatrist from Los Angeles, Mark McDonald, who I've gotten to know over the last few months, he's from Los Angeles. He was quoted extensively in the white paper that the Orange County School District put together, and even the Wall Street Journal quoted him last week. He said, the fact is, we know children are not getting sick. We know that children do not transmit the disease to adults. What we're dealing with right now is that we adults are afraid. And he goes on to say, and I'll put it in my own words, as parents, we're always afraid. There are a lot of things that happen with our children that make us afraid, whether it's the first day of school or when they get behind the wheel of the car for the very first time on their own, or going away to college. And we have to go ahead and understand that we're afraid and they're afraid, and give them the courage to face that fear.
I think you're exactly right, Jenny Beth. Thank you for all you're doing to help us get our schools open. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, when we come back, President Trump brought back the coronavirus briefings. How did he do? We'll discuss with our company after the break.